Joining us now is Kyle Shideler, Director and Senior Analyst for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism at the Center for Security Policy. He's also the editor of the book Unmasking Antifa, 5 Perspectives on a Growing Threat. Kyle, thank you for joining us tonight. Now, tensions are already beginning to flare in Minnesota following this killing, with protesters this afternoon showing aggression towards police, driving them out of the crime scene. In your assessment, though, what are the chances this shooting sparks retaliation from anti-ICE and other far-left groups, and what could this look like?
Well, I think it's probable. We have already seen in some far-left extremist social media calls to use arms, to take up arms against police in response to this incident. So the rhetoric is certainly hot. It is certainly there. We've seen attacks, violent perpetrated ambushes against ICE officers in the past already. So it's certainly within the skill set of some of these far-left extremist actors.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey this afternoon accused federal immigration agents of, quote, causing chaos. He said Minneapolis is demanding ICE to leave the city immediately. What do you make of the mayor's response, seemingly putting the blame on federal agents here?
Look, none of this would be happening if the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis did not illegally act as a sanctuary city trying to shield criminal illegal aliens from deportation. If they cooperated with the federal government and federal law enforcement in upholding immigration law, as do most of the states in this country, they wouldn't be having these kinds of situations. They deliberately inflame these situations with their sanctuary city policies. And then when federal law enforcement attempts to uphold the laws they are sworn to do, they take the side of radical protesters against the federal government.
Now, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz this afternoon announced that he issued a warning order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard to, quote, protect Minnesotans from rogue ICE agents. How would an order like this work, ordering state law enforcement to act against federal law enforcement?
Well, in practice, I don't see much likelihood of that being the case. In all likelihood, I think probably Governor Walz is trying to get ahead of President Trump ordering the Minnesota National Guard to Minneapolis by having the state activate them first. I don't anticipate that there being a real probability of conflict between the National Guard and federal law enforcement. In most cases, they have very good cooperating relationship. If need be, President Trump could certainly federalize the Minnesota National Guard if Governor Walz was to attempt to use it in a way to prohibit federal law enforcement officers from doing their job. That certainly has sort of shades of some of the incidents in the 1960s where the federal government deployed National Guard and even active military forces to some of the southern states to uphold civil rights legislation and to enforce desegregation. So Tim Walz really is finding himself on the wrong side of history here with some of his rhetoric.
And Kyle, according to the Department of Homeland Security, by November of 2025, assaults and violence against ICE officers was up over 1,000% compared with the same period in 2024. Now, DHS has placed blame on the rhetoric from, quote, sanctuary politicians. Now, you've studied radicalization in radical groups for many years. Well, most regular Americans would never harm law enforcement. How, in your experiences, this kind of messaging interpreted by already radical individuals?
Well, I think what it sends the message is that if they attempt to foment a riot or an unlawful assembly, they can expect some level of political cover. Where far left extremists think that they will get political cover from local or state politicians, they have a tendency to be a little bit more aggressive. We've certainly seen that in the case of Portland, in Oregon, in Seattle, in Washington State, for example. In places where they know they will not get political cover, these sorts of protests tend to be disrupted relatively early. They tend to stay more peaceful. And I think it really is important for the politicians in some of these areas to get out ahead of this stuff and say, look, you can have whatever political opinion you want. You are allowed to be upset. You are allowed to protest lawfully. but we will not countenance any criminal activity. We will not countenance rioting. We will not countenance attacking police officers, whether local, state, or federal. But when you have politicians who don't use that kind of language, they are certainly leaving the door open for bad actors.
And Kyle, you spoke earlier with NTD about this potentially sparking more aggression. What do you think needs to happen next in order to prevent rioting like we saw in 2020?
Well, I think first and foremost, the governor of Minnesota, the mayor of Minneapolis, they need to come out and say, look, be peaceful, do not engage in criminal activity. We cannot be, you will not convince us to side in favor of rioting against the federal government. Unfortunately, that's not the kind of language we're seeing right now, but it is the kind of language that would have a positive effect in keeping things calm. And unfortunately, that's just not the kind of language we're seeing deployed right now.
Lots to watch for here for sure. Kyle Shideler, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.